at ground
So both sides, what we want to do today is present, I don't know if we'll finish it all today, but the goal, 5 different shitos on the Mitzvah of Kiddush, on how to define the Mitzvah of Kiddush. And I'll just mention the names of the various shitos in a particular order that I think is logical to present these shitos. One is the Rambam in Sefer HaMitzvos. The second is the Ramban, which we've already discussed, so we'll sort of give an overview of the Ramban. The third is the Rambam in Mishnah Torah. The fourth is the Shita of the Bahag, the Baal Halachas Gedolos. And finally, the fifth Shita is the Shita of Rashi in Masechta Shvuos. So we're going to start with the Rambam in the Sefer HaMitzvos. So let me read to you the language of the Rambam. Give me a second. And this is Mitzvah Saseh Kuf Nun He, 155. Hishet Tzivanu Lekadesh Es HaShabbos Vilomar Dvorim Biknisoso Ubiyitziaso Nazkir Bam Yitzias Mitzrayim V'Kiddush Hayom Umaloso V'Hibodlo Mishar Hayomim Hakodmim Mimenu V'Aboim Achrov V'Hu Sha'omro Yisborach Zocher Es Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho Klomar, Zachreu v'kidsheu b'bracha. Now, there's another girsa in the Rambam that quotes the Mechilta, and the Mechilta says, L'kadsho b'bracha. So we're going to make a few comments now on what we think is going on here in this Rambam. Point number one is the Rambam says that what is the mitzvah of Kiddush? Lomar Dvorim. So the mitzvah of Kiddush is Amiras Dvorim. The Rambam says Lekadesh es HaShabbos, but he does not say Lekadesh es Yom HaShabbos. And that's an important point because when we compare and contrast the Rambam in Sefer HaMitzvos to the Rambam in Mishnah Torah, there he says Lekadesh es Yom HaShabbos. And we'll try to figure out why that addition of the word Yom, which is omitted here in the Sefer HaMitzvos, is so important. The second point is that the Rambam, in defining the mitzvah, says biknisaso ubiyitziaso, putting Havdalah together with Kiddush in one breath, and apparently with the same significance, meaning that this mitzvah requires these, as we said, amiras devarim, both going into Shabbos and leaving Shabbos. And that has great significance because what it means is that Havdalah is included in the mitzvah of Zocher Es Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho. And if one were to make Kiddush on Friday night and omit Havdalah Motzi Shabbos, he has not fulfilled the mitzvah. Maybe he gets part of the mitzvah, but not the entire mitzvah. So that this mitzvah is comprised of two parts, of Amiris Dvarim B'Knisaso U'B'Yitziaso. Point number 3, the Rambam up front, he hasn't even gotten into the nitty-gritty details, and immediately he says, Nazkir Bam Yitzias Mitzrayim. Now, we know that in our Kiddush, we recite Zeichel Amase Bereshis and then Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim. But there's no question that the Rambam here is putting Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim up front. And one would wonder, why is Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim so important? With regard to Regalim, we know that all 3 Regalim have one underlying common theme, and that is Yitzias Mitzrayim, especially, of course, Pesach. But with regard to Shabbos, the concept or the connection between Yitzias Mitzrayim and Shabbos is much more esoteric, not very clear. And there's a Tosas in Psachim who suggests that when the Mitzrim forced to enslave the Jewish people, the forced labor of the Jews in Mitzrayim expressed itself in 39 different categories of work. And therefore, going into Shabbos, we, so to speak, re-experience the Geula from Shibud Mitzrayim, because now we're doing willingly what they forced us to. We're doing the opposite of what they forced us to do in Mitzrayim. There, they forced us to engage in 39 malachas, and here we're free people to absolve ourselves and avoid and be in a state of menucha, of resting and abstaining from these malachas. So we have to thank Hashem and remind ourselves that back in the day, we were required to do these malachas, and now we don't have to do these malachas, but rather we could be shoves. But once again, despite, without Chas v'Sholom arguing against Tosas, it does seem like a little bit of a stretch to connect Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim with Kiddush. It is mentioned in our Nusach HaKiddush. I'm not denying that. So, no matter how you slice the cake, we've got to figure out the connection between remembering Yitzias Mitzrayim and Kiddush. But one would have thought that's a little bit secondary. The Rambam here in the Sefer HaMitzvos puts it up as like a primary element in the Mitzvah of Kiddush. We go on. Now here, and I think this is the crux of the entire matter, the Rambam, in addition to Yitzias Mitzrayim, has a list of what I call, again, this is my own phraseology, I don't know if it will resonate, I call it Nekudos Hashvach, meaning certain specific points of praise regarding the Shabbos. Let me give you an examples. The Rambam says, first of all, Ma'aloso. We have to speak about something called the Maila of Shabbos. We'll figure out what that means. Then he goes on and he says, Hibadlo, another concept that Hibadlo means that this is a unique day, and he goes on and he specifies that it's different from the days that came before it and the days that came after it. And then the Rambam adds that we should be mazkir the Kedushas Hayom, the sanctity of the day. So we've got Yitzias Mitzrayim, we have the sanctity of the day. We've got the maloso, the mile of the day. We've got ibodlo, the separateness of the day. And then add to that bibracha. Now, generally speaking, there are only two exceptions to this rule, but it's very rare. The rule of thumb is that a bracha is derabanan. The only two cases that I know of a bracha d'oraisa are birchas haTorah, which is derived from Kishem Hashem Ekra Havu Gadol Elokeinu, and birchas hamazon, which is derived from the achalta v'savata berachta. Now, in the Sefer HaMitzvos, he's not interested in derabbanans. He is defining the mitzvah. Hu shetzivanu, etc., etc. And he writes bibracha. And then again, according to the second girsa, he even quotes a mechilta that derives the requirement of a bracha from the word lekadsha, clearly indicating that we're dealing with a doraisa. And I would be tempted to add a third bracha doraisa to the list that we mentioned before, that's comprised of Kiddush, of birchas hamazon and birchas haTorah. And this has tremendous repercussions. For example, in a case of suffix, let's say I don't remember, I'm suffering from a little bit of forgetfulness. Did I make Kiddush or did I not make Kiddush? Now, the rule of suffix is suffix brachos lahakil. But the way I see it here in the Sefer HaMitzvos, you would have to say suffix doraisa lechumra, and you would make the bracha of Kiddush a second time around, meaning not a second time around. We hopefully it's the first time around. But in this suffix situation, we'd have to go lechumra. Like, for example, if you don't know whether you benched or not, and you ate, kidei svia, then you'd have to bench because it's a suffix doraisa. We don't apply the principle of suffix brachas lahakil in a case of a bracha doraisa, which, as I said before, is very rare. But we might want to add this as a third case on the list. Now, what about yayin? So let me read to you the next line in the Sefer HaMitzvos, and he writes, Ubebiur amru. I'll try to translate those words. Ubebiur amru zachreu ala yayin. Now, we have two words here, ubebiur and amru. Let's go backwards. Amru means they said, meaning the Chachamim said, which automatically, by association, a bell clip, goes on, or a light goes on in a head that we're dealing with the D'Rabbanan, which would be a little bit strange because, as I said at the outset, the Rambam in Sefer HaMitzvos is telling you what is the mitzvah say. But let's go back to the word before Amru, and that's bibiur. And I would translate that word as in explanation. What does that mean? When we talk about a D'Rabbanans, we don't use the word ubibiur. We use the word vitiknu. There's what's called a takonas chachamim, meaning they institute a mitzvah, let's say tiknu Chanukah, tiknu Ner Shabbos, tiknu Netilas Yadayim. These are all takonos. And Ad Kedei Kach, the Gemara thinks that maybe we shouldn't even be making a bracha on these takonos. But you would never say ubibiur amru shechayev litol yadayim, ubibiur amru shechayev likros hamegillah. No, you never find that language. So I'm going to submit to you what I think is going on here in this Rambam, again in Sefer HaMitzvos, that it's unclear from the psukim in the Torah, or specifically from Zochros Yom Shabbos Lekadsho, that were required yayin. Ubebiur amru, to explain and clarify that ambiguity, the Chachamim stepped up to the plate and they interpreted the mitzvah. So this is not what you call a mitzvah that originates with the Chachamim, classified as a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, meaning yayin, but rather the Rabbanan are explaining what the Torah had in mind. And therefore, when the Rambam says, Bebir Amru Zachreu, that word Zachreu is referring back to the pasuk in the Torah, Zachar es Yom HaShabbos Zachreu al yayin. How do you fulfill Zechira? Bebir Amru, they interpret it to mean that Zachreu al yayin. And I'm submitting to you the following thesis, that we have another Kiddush, another element, according to the Sefer HaMitzvos, in the Mitzvah Doraisa of Zachas Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho, in addition to the elements that we discussed to describe Bidvarim, the Kiddush Hayom, the Milas Hayom, the Hibadlo Mishara Amim, Zeichel Yitzias Mitzrayim, Bibracha. Now we'll add Yayin. And you may recall, hopefully, that in the past we've discussed this more than once, that the Gemara in Nazir on Daf Dalid, if we read the text of the Gemara as we have it, says that Yayin is Doraisa, to the extent to which the Gemara establishes that Mushpa v'Omed Me'ar Sinai, a Nazir, would not be enjoined from drinking the cup of wine of Kiddush. So imagine a Nazir, let's say a Nazir is 30 days, Nazir, Stam Nazir, Shloshim Yom. He will not drink wine during the 30 days with the exception of 4 occasions, meaning Kiddush on Friday night. And that seems to be the sheet of Rashi, of the Tosas Rid, of the Mefarish in Nazir, of our Gir says we have the text of the Gemara, Mushpa v'Yomed. So if I tell you that the Rambam in Sefer HaMitzvos holds that Yayin is Doraisa in Kiddush, I'm not creating a new sheet in amongst the Rishonim. I'm just classifying the Rambam in Sefer HaMitzvos under that category of Rishonim that maintain that Yayin is Doraisa. Now I see Joe, I see Gershon. The rest of the screen, I don't know, I see the names or pictures. Oh, now I think I see Bruce. Bobby's probably driving or something. Oh, there's Bobby. And David, sometimes I see him in front of the Kotel, but there he is. I'm telling you, both say, you have to do what you have to do, but I'm just telling you what I feel. It's a whole different experience for me. Zoom is hard enough for me. If I see your faces, your beautiful faces, it's a whole different experience. It's just like a relationship. It's like halfway between, recording a shiur with no one around and having a face-to-face shiur with where you see the people. It's halfway there, maybe even more than halfway. Anyway. But again, you got to do what you got to do. And there are many, many reasons why a person closes his camera. So I don't judge anybody. I had one guy, I don't want to mention his name, but he used to turn on the Zoom camera at about 10 a.m., 9 a.m. in the morning, and he was still in his pajamas. Yeah, in that case, I wanted to tell him to shut off the camera. But okay, anyway. But that's a true story. So we have now a shita of the Rambam in Sefer HaMitzvos, and if I were to put together all the different elements that we spoke about into one fundamental definition, one short, precise definition, I would say that the mitzvah of Kiddush is Amiras Shevach, but Amiras Shevach, according to the Rambam, in Sefer HaMitzvos takes on a lot of specific dimensions. It's not just, as I said once in the name of the Rashba, you remember, that, he says, oh, Shabbos is great. I shut off my cell phone and I could rest and I eat good food and I love my wife's children and so forth. No, no, no. That's not sufficient. The Torah itself has specific requirements of how to fulfill Amiras Sheva. And I would add that a bracha is the Torah's method of expressing Sheva. For example, in studying God's Torah, or in expressing Shevach Hashem for providing me with the food that I eat and the satiation that I experience. There are many other occasions for Shevach in which I express my thanks and my appreciation, but those are D'Rabbanan. In the Torah itself, we only find 2 occasions explicitly that require Amiras Sheva. But in those 2 cases, which set, I think, a precedent for how the Torah itself, when the Shevach is Doraisa, requires a structure, that structure is a bracha. And that applies both to Birchas HaTorah and to Birchas HaMazon. Now you may ask me, a bracha is the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan were the ones who established the Matbeah Shel Bracha, the Nusach of Bracha. But the answer, I believe, and this again, this requires a whole nother shir and a whole nother discussion, is that according to Sama Moroim, Shem Umalchus in a bracha is Doraisa. But in any event, we see the precedents in 2 cases of a Chiyuv Shevach that the Torah requires that you recite that Shevach in the form of a bracha. And I would use the following term. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I think I may have mentioned it in the past. Achsheve. What's Achsheve? Achsheve means that the Torah wants to upgrade something and give it a chashivut, give it a significance. So therefore, it's not enough that I, as we said before, I come to the Shabbos table and I say, oh, wow, this is great. I've been waiting, a whole week, to come to the Shabbos table on Friday night. No. We need an achshave. And you may recall that we spoke about subjective becoming objective. So the achshave, and in this case, the framework of a bracha, gives a certain, let's call it legal status or significance. Like, for example, in halacha, we have something called shiurim, right? So you may say, well, okay, it wasn't a kezayis. It was less than a kezayis. But the Torah says that unless you, like matzah, for example, we're already beginning your Shloshim Yom, we have to think about matzah, right? So I might say, well, I took a bite of matzah. No. That's not choshev. The Torah wants you to eat a kezayis of matzah. And the Torah might say exactly how fast or slow you eat that kezayis. So these are all dinim that legally objectify the action and make them choshev. So your shevach to praise the Shabbos becomes upgraded and is given, a status of, shall I say, a business class seat on the plane, and chashivus by what? By virtue of the fact that it is formulated in a bracha. Not only that, but the Rambam seems to say that the bracha has to touch or express certain very important points, and he delineates them. These are the nekudos hashevach. And if one would miss out on malaso, or on kiddushaso, or on hibadlo mishar hayomim, then he would not have achieved the kiyum HaMitzvah of amiras shevach, the way the Torah engineers it, or at least it's an incomplete mitzvah. Maybe b'diavad, he gets some credit for it, but it's not the real mitzvah. Now, I was wondering, and maybe you could help me out on this. Why doesn't the Rambam add what I consider another good candidate for Nekudos Hasheva? And that is Bechiras Am Yisrael. The fact that God has designated the people of Israel as his chosen nation. And if you take a look in the Nusach HaKiddush, you'll find it there. So let me take a minute and I'll bring over the Nusach HaKiddush. I should have done that before. In the Nusach HaKiddush, we say, Kivanu v'acharta, v'osanu kidashta mikol ha'amim. Now, I would love to take a survey here, and if you have that in your Kiddush, what I just read, please raise your hand. I'm the first one to raise my hand. Bruce, you didn't raise your hand. Does that mean you don't say that in your Kiddush? Because there are minhagim to omit those. As a matter of fact, in the siddur that I'm holding, those words are in brackets. But the generally accepted minhag, and I think here it's, let's say it's 5 out of 6, and maybe Bruce, you'll find it in your Kiddush too, and that'll be.
No, I do. I just couldn't find the button to unmute.
Oh, I see. So it's 6 out of 6. We have a unanimous Nusach HaKiddush of Kivanu v'acharta v'osanu kidash mikol amim. In fact, since the Rambam includes Havdalah, if you ask me what is the quintessential or most significant Nekudas HaShevach in Havdalah, it's the fact that God has chosen us. Hamavdil ben Kodesh l'chol ben Yisrael lo amin. So I'm not talking about a Kiddush on Motzi Yontif, I'm talking about the Kiddush on Motzi Shabbos. So it baffled my mind a little bit. Why did the Rambam omit that Nekudas HaShevach? I would almost be tempted to add it to the list. Go ahead, Joe.
I was just you brought an explanation with regards to Zecher Yetzias Mitzrayim as being part of the concept of the mitzvahs and the avoda. I always thought that Kivonu v'acharta was part of Yetzias Mitzrayim. That's the whole issue.
There are like a flood of thoughts that come to my mind. I'm trying to figure out what you're saying. Are you saying that when I recite Zecher Yetzias Mitzrayim, Mela, I'm saying that God has chosen us from all the nations? Is that what you're saying? It's like included under Zecher Yetzias Mitzrayim?
That's how I always understood it. That's why.
Great. If you want to say it that way, that's great. So the fact that God took us out of Mitzrayim is indicative of the fact that God has chosen us. And then the purpose of Yetzias Mitzrayim is to get to Har Sinai, in which case God gives us the Torah. So the final Kiddush of Am Yisrael, the sanctity of Am Yisrael, is achieved at Har Sinai, but the actual choice of Klal Yisrael for the purpose of Har Sinai was inherent in Yetzias Mitzrayim.
And and that's part of the reason why Kivanu v'acharta v'osanu kidashta is in Kiddush. It's an explanation of Zecher Yetzias Mitzrayim. I always thought it was, and that's why some people leave it out. Because you don't
but again, I think it has to do with Shabbos. In other words, what we're saying is, forget about God redeeming us from Mitzrayim, but in Kiddush, when we want to describe the greatness of Shabbos, we're saying that God, you know what? We praise you because you chose us to give us the Shabbos. In fact, the Gemara says that Goysha Shavas Chayiv Misa. So there's no, democracy here. There's no universalism when it comes to Shabbos. Shabbos is our baby.
Right.
Does not belong to any other nation. Again, any member of the other nation could decide to convert, and then he becomes a Ben Yisrael. But other than that, Shabbos is ours. So in a sense, we are praising the Shabbos when we say Kivanu v'charto ve'osanu kiddush, because you have sanctified us and given us the Shabbos. Chazal described the Shabbos as the great gift. Matana chashuva yeshli b'beis genazai v'Shabbos shma. And this is a gift that was given to us as part of, or an expression of our bechira, our kibana v'charta, you have chosen us. Now, in terms of the other nekudos that are delineated here, do they reflect themselves here? So first of all, I would say, as far as Kedusha Shabbos is, it says Shabbos Kodsho bi Avav Ratzon Hilchilanu. So we definitely describe the Kedusha Shabbos. And earlier, when we say Yom HaShishi Vaychol Shemaim, it says Vaykadosh also. So there definitely is an expression here of the Kedusha of Shabbos. Now, as far as Ma'aloso is concerned, it would seem to me, and again, you're the jury, you decide if you like it or you don't like it, that if you turn in this city, you flip back a few pages, and right before Kiddush is Tfilas Arvis, like 4 pages earlier. So if you see there, in Arvis it says, Ata Kidashtas Yom HaShvi L'Shmecha. Fine, that's Kedusha Shabbos. And then it says, Tachlis Maseh Shamayim V'Oretz. Meaning that the entire universe, the whole goal or purpose of creation reaches its climax in the Shabbos. So if you ask me what's the mile of Shabbos, I would say it's Tachlis Maseh Shamayim V'Oretz. Tachlis meaning the ultimate purpose of the creation of the heavens and the earth. And if you ask me about Hibadlo Mishar Hayomim, we say Ubirachto Mikol Hayomim V'Kidashto Mikol Hazmanim. Now at this point, what comes to my mind is the famous Magen Avram that we've spoken about on many occasions, and the Magen Avram paskins, that once you daven Ma'ariv, you fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush. Now, that's only a half-baked answer to my question. My question being is, why don't we find Ma'aloso and Hibadlo in the Nusach of Kiddush that we say on Friday night? But I would submit to you that on a Doraisa level, the main Kiddush is in Tefillah. So therefore, when the Rabbanan formulated the Nusach for Kiddush, to fulfill the Doraisa, they did so in Tefillah. That's going to be the first Kiddush. And with that, we fulfill the mitzvah Doraisa of Kiddush. So anything we see in the Rambam, we look into the Nusach HaTefillah, and that's going to be the fulfillment of the mitzvah of Zachris Yom Shabbos L'Kadsha. The only problem is that we interpreted the Rambam to mean that Yayin is part of the mitzvah of Kiddush. How could I be Yotzei my mitzvah Doraisa of Kiddush in Tefillah without Yayin? So Bishleim, I understand, according to most Rishonim, hold that Kiddush, that Yayin is only D'Rabbanan. But according to those Rishonim, and there are many of them, maybe they're not the majority, but they certainly are an outspoken minority, who maintain that you require Yayin for Kiddush. The only thing is, I'm not sure, and this has to be understood one way or the other. I don't know the answer to this question. Would those Rishonim who require Yayin, is it Likuva? Meaning, if I don't have Yayin, does that mean the whole mitzvah goes down the tubes? I don't know. In other words, I'm interpreting the Rambam and Sefer Mitzvahs to mean that the way the Torah envisioned the mitzvah of Kiddush is with Yayin, but I'm not willing to go a step further and say that without Yayin, you're not Yotzei. So I still want to maintain the Kiddush of the Magen Avram, which of course leads to certain problems when you come home from shul and you want to be motzi your wife and so forth and so on, the Dagul Mervav and all that stuff. But I would like to submit to you that it's possible, I don't have a proof, but there's a possibility that I can reconcile the Rambam with the Magen Avram's Psak and say that the Rambam Einochinami requires in the perfect ideal vision of Kiddush, he requires yayin. And ubibir amru means this is how the Rabban understood zachar, zachreu al yayin. But it's not absolutely critical. It's not indispensable. And therefore, Eino likuva. We can still accept among an Avram that I have fulfilled my mitzvah doraisa of Kiddush in Tefillah. Now, if on the other hand, you want to maintain that according to the Rambam in Sefer HaMitzvos, Yayin is likuva, it's absolutely indispensable, it's critical, then we have to throw out the Magen Avram, again according to the Rambam, and then we have a basic question: where in the nusach of our Kiddush, ala Yayin, do we have mention of Maloso v'Badlo Mishar Hayomin? Because when I open the Kiddush, unless you can tell me I'm missing something, I don't see anything about Maloso. It's a Tachlis Ma'aser, so all that was omitted. Nor do I see anything about Hibadlo Mishar Hayomin. I don't get it. Unless you want to say B'dochak, that because we say that Hashem was Makadosh the Shabbos, that itself indicates that it's different than all the other days. But it's not satisfying, because in the Nusach Tefillah, the Balei, the Chazal, they went out of their way to point out that, again, quoting the Nusach Tefillah, Kidashtim Kol Yizmanim, Beirachtim Kol Hayomim. Why don't they do that in Kiddush? Now here I want to throw out a bomb. I don't believe that anyone will accept my revolutionary idea, but everyone's entitled to have their own opinion. Am I right? It's a free country. I would like to suggest that Chazal created an umbrella that's made up of many different parts. It's kind of like if I give a mashal, in Canada there are provinces, in America there are states, but all of them form one whole entity. So the Torah says that your mitzvah of Zoch Shabbos Kadsho is Sheva. The Rabbanan, in formulating and objectifying that Shevach, they took the liberty of using various tfilos, a whole variety of them, to fulfill the mitzvah of Shevach, Amira Shevach of Kiddush, in the totality of all these different tfilos. Which means that if I start with the Kiddush in Tefillah, and then I continue with the Kiddush al Yayin in my house at the Mokum Suda, I'm gradually building up to a totality of all the Nekudos HaShevach that I am required to express. So, for example, where does it say Zechel Yitzias Mitzrayim in Tefillah? I challenge you to find it. The Magen Avram says I can be Yotzei Kiddush Doraisa in Tefillah. Where's Zechel Yitzias Mitzrayim? But the answer might be that for whatever reason, which has to be understood, the Rabbanan assumed that after you recite Kiddush in davening, which ends with Makadosh HaShabbos, then you recite Kiddush when you get home, and there you will insert Zechel Yitzias Mitzrayim. So it goes in both directions. I'll give you an example. The Rambam in Sefer HaMitzvos according to what I think is the right girsa, I can't promise you, adds the word legadlo. Legadlo. Where do we find legadlo? So I think the answer is, again, you'll laugh at me, in Birkas HaMazon. Because if you open up to Birkas HaMazon, we have Ritzei Vachlitzenu Hashem Elokeinu b'mitzvoseh mitzvos Yom HaShvi Shabbos HaGadol Ki Yom Zeh Gadol v'Kadoshu. The concept of the godless Hashem, the godless of Shabbos, is incorporated into Birkas HaMazon. So if you have the Girsa in the Rambam, which many do, legadlo, where's legadlo? I didn't find it. I only found it in Ritzei in Birkas HaMazon. Again, perhaps another example of this constellation of tfilos, the sum total of which is the mitzvah of Kiddush. And if we accept that thesis, then we have to go through each tefillah and figure out why this particular dimension of Shevach was emphasized and the others were omitted. And that's a shtickl arbet. That's a piece of work. Now, if you ask me, where do we speak about the great gift to Klal Yisrael that we were chosen for Shabbos? According to those who don't have kivana v'charta, yelsonu kidashta. If somebody could check me out on this, I think in Chabad they don't say it, but there are other communities that don't have it. So the answer is that we get in Havdalah on Motzi Shabbos. Hamavdu ben Kodesh l'chol ben Yisrael lo amin. You have separated us from the other nations because you've given us the Shabbos. Here's another expression of a tefillah that's not the nusach of Kiddush, but yet it's part of the matrix, the sum total of which, as I said before, it's called in psychology the gestalt of Shevach, of the Nekudas HaShevach for the mitzvah of Kiddush. Well, that's a pretty radical idea. So don't share it with anybody. You know, if Rav Miller finds out about it, I'm in deep trouble, you know. How's he doing, Rav Shlomo? Is he okay? Anyway, yeah, go ahead. So
I understand. So why doesn't anybody who the people who say that you have to have in mind, not have in mind to be Mekabel Shabbos when in Mariv? Why
not to be Mekabel Shabbos in Mariv? That I never heard of. Not to
be kind of the mitzvah of Kiddush.
Okay, good.
Right.
So let's make sure we got to be
right. Considered. I'm sorry. Why would they say this if Zeich Letzis isn't in there? So you obviously you're not being Kabbalit because that's an integral part of our understanding.
Right. So again, there are two possible answers to your question. Either the Magen Avram, who says Yo Yotze Kiddush Doraisa in Tefillah, he doesn't hold like the Rambam. Rather, he holds that Zeich Letzis Mitzrayim is a nice, shall I say, embellishment. It's icing on the cake, but it's not likuva, and therefore you could be Yotze in Tefillah. Alternatively, and again, this is the more radical approach, to say that even according to the Rambam, you could be Yotze without Zeichel Yitzis Mitzrayim. Although it's a little bit odd because, you know, the first thing on the list here in the Rambam Sefer HaMitzvos is Zeichel Yitzis Mitzrayim. Now, Joe, I don't know, purposely or inadvertently mentioned something that triggered off something in my mind, namely that Tfilas Arvis is a Kabbalah Shabbos. And I thought to myself, you know what? that resonates very well, because if you look at the Nusach HaTfilah, we have two different tefillos. Did everybody realize that on Friday night we have two different tefillos? Hello, anybody home? Who can help me out here? What are the two tefillos that we have on Friday night?
Both Shabbos and Merv.
What did you say? Kabbalah Shabbos and Ma'ariv?
Yeah, Friday night, is right?
What do you mean by Kabbalah Shabbos? What are you talking about? You mean L'chadodi?
I mean, it's not Shemon Esrei, obviously, but it's a form of tefillah, regardless.
No, I'm talking about Shemon Esrei. We have two Shemon Esreis on Leil Shabbos. What are they? Gershon, you're shaking your head. What do you have in mind?
Chazor Shat. Yeah. We have the Chazor Shat.
You mean
1 second, I can't hear two people. 1 second, I'll be right with you. What?
Mogadaves then?
Is that what you're saying, Gershon?
Oh,
Okay. So let me just reformulate, and then Joe, you'll tell me what you have in mind. We have a Tfilas HaYachid, and we have a Tfilas HaTzibur.
Right.
And it's the only Ma'ariv that we know of that has a kiyum of Chazoras HaShatz, in which case the Shatz represents the Tzibur. Now, it's very fascinating, because from the perspective of Kabbalah Shabbos, as Joe was mentioning before, I would put Chazoras HaShatz, meaning Tefillah Me'ein Sheva, up front. Why? Because look at the Nusach. We says Lefanav Navod B'Yirav Afachad. I mean, those four words appear in Chazoras HaShatz. They do not appear in the Tfilas Yachid. And of course, it makes sense that it's written in the plural, because it's the Kabbalah of the Tzibur. It could be that even in the Tfilas Yachid, there is a Kabbalah when we declare Ritzei b'Menucha Seinu. In other words, we're accepting upon ourselves Menucha Shabbos, and we're asking Hashem for Ritzui. And then we say again afterwards, Vanchilenu, etc., etc., V'anuchu ba Yisrael. Go ahead, Joe, what were you going to say?
No, good. The Rav said nothing. Go ahead.
Okay. So we've gotten 20% of where we wanted to go, and we have 1 out of 5 shitos in what is the mitzvah of Zochus Yom Shabbos L'Kadsha. The Ramban that we discussed last week is the second shita. Let's just highlight some of the main points of the Ramban. The Ramban holds that the mitzvah of Zochus Yom Shabbos L'Kadsha should be split into two. There's Zochar and then there's L'Kadsha. Zochar means to remember the Shabbos the whole week long, and therefore, if I have some good food or some nice clothing, etc., etc., I designate it for Shabbos. And the Ramban adds the words "V'lo nishkacheu." We should not forget Shabbos the whole week long. We have to remind Shabbos has to be somewhere on our conscious mind the whole week long, and not only that, the zechira of Shabbos is fulfilled daily when we name the day. So, for example, today, at least in this part of the world, it was Yom Revi'i. I assume by now you caught up to us. So when you say today's Yom Revi'i, that's a mitzvah of Zochas Yom HaShabbos, according to Ramban. Because we say it's the 4th day of the week of Shabbos, meaning we're 4 days towards Shabbos. L'Kadsha, on the other hand, is an entirely different mitzvah, according to Ramban, and it means that we have to sanctify the Shabbos. And the Ramban compares it to the sanctification of Yovel, that just like in the case of the 50th Jubilee year, Bezdin has an obligation to be Mekadesh and declare this is the 50th year sanctified with Kedushas Yovel, with all its implications. So too, says the Ramban, on the 7th day of the week, we have to sanctify that day with Kedusha Shabbos. And of course, the famous question, what are you talking about? We have to sanctify the Shabbos. The sanctity of the Shabbos is Kviya V'Kaima. Whether you like it or not, it's a given. It's not like Yontif where we have to Mekadesh the Yontif. But somehow, according to the Ramban, there are 2 dimensions to Kedusha Shabbos, as we discussed, there's the Kiddush of Kvi V'Kaimi that exists and comes down from the Himmel, from the heavens, and then there's our action of being Mekadesh the Shabbos to add another dimension to Kiddush Shabbos. And we tried to explain it based on the Ramban back in Breishis, where the Ramban says that Shabbos is Ma'ayan HaBrachot, not Me'ein HaBrachot. As I told you, I'd like to change the text here, but again, maybe I'll get Rav Shlomo Miller to agree with me. I don't know, but the text should say Ma'ayan HaBrachot, and the Ma'ayan HaBrachot is Shamayim up in the Himmel, and we have to tap in and bring down that shefa of the Ma'ayan HaBrachot down to earth, and that's what we do through Kiddush. Now, according to the Ramban, the idea of reciting Kiddush as a bracha would seem to be totally irrelevant on a Doraisa level. Again, the Rabbanan could create what they want to create, but as far as the Torah is concerned, I don't have to remember the Shabbos by reciting a bracha. I mean, if Haraya, the Mitzvah of Zachar, applies the whole week long, who makes a bracha? Imagine I find a nice shirt and I say, Baruch Atah Hashem, and I say, Lizkar Shabbos. No, there's no such bracha. And even on Friday night, where I'm being Makadesh the Yom, like Bezdin was Makadesh Shnas HaYovel, why a bracha? I mean, could you imagine if the 50th year, Baruch Atah Hashem, Asher Kitshar Mitzvos Tzvaro L'Kadesh Shnas HaYovel, I don't know that there is such a bracha. Furthermore, the whole idea of breaking down Kiddush into Amiras Shevach, I think is totally foreign to the Ramban. The Ramban doesn't have Amiras Shevach. The Ramban is talking about, remembering the Shabbos and not forgetting the Shabbos and designating this, that, and the other thing for Shabbos, mentioning the Shabbos every day when we count the days of the week. There's no Shevach here. So this whole structure that we created in the Rambam, meaning in Sefer HaMitzvos, with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different nekudos and elements of Shevach, is totally foreign to the Ramban. In fact, if you were to ask me, would the Ramban require yayin for Kiddush, on a D'oraisa level I'm talking, the answer is a flat no. Could you imagine in the 50th year of Yovel, the Bezdin would say, bring me a cup of wine. I want to be Mekadesh the 50th year of Yovel. Yayin is something that enhances Shevach and Kiddush, and what we call Shira, Ein Shira El Yayin. You sing the song of praises over a cup of wine. But to sanctify something, you don't imagine, hey, here's an animal in front of me. I want to, I can't do this, but let's say I would be Makadesh this for an Ola, carbon Ola. So first I'm going to say, wait a minute, bring me a cup of wine. I want to be Magdish this animal for the Mizbeach. They'd certainly laugh me out of your Hupitzville. So therefore, Yayin, according to the Ramban, must be the Rabbanan. And Baruch Hashem, I found it explicitly in the Ramban. The Ramban says, "Umasha Amru Rabosenu Zachreu Al Yayin Eino Ela de Rabbanan." The Ramban is outspoken about the fact that Yayin is the Rabbanan. And if you would ask the Ramban, where is Zeichel L'Tzias Mitzrayim? I don't think the Ramban needs Zeichel L'Tzias Mitzrayim, because that's a Shevach to Hashem for taking us out of Mitzrayim, but the mitzvah, at least on a D'oraisa level, is not Shevach. And the third Shita, which we'll discuss in Mitzvah Hashem on a different occasion, maybe next week if you're around. It's getting close to Bein Hazmanim, I don't know. But the Rambam in Mishnah Torah, in the Yad HaChazaka, in the famous magnum opus of the Rambam. And there the Rambam says something totally different. And I believe it's a third Shita. And don't ask me how the Rambam could say something in the Sefer, in the Mishnah Torah that's different than what he himself wrote in the Sefer HaMitzvos. But as I've told you on many occasions, there was a difference of, the historians think it could be anywhere between like 10 and 14 years difference between the Sefer HaMitzvos, which is, by the way, written in Arabic, and the Mishnah Torah, which is written in Lashon Kodesh, the beautiful Lashon Kodesh of the Rambam. And I can tell you that great minds change their mind constantly. And I always tell you the story about, I remember in my years in Rav Soloveitchik's class, when somebody said to him, Rebbe, this is what you said 5 years ago. And he slammed his hand down. He said, forget about what I said 5 years ago. You listen to what I say now. The only question I asked my friend Alan Dubin, why didn't the Rambam cross out what he wrote in the Sefer HaMitzvos? And the answer is because he believed that even though he changed his mind, his original thinking was still worth. So we have a machlokas between the Rambam and the Rambam. But to me, that's not a problem. That's like a machlokas between the Rambam and the Rashba, or the Rambam and the Ramban. Okay, then we'll stop here. I'll take this opportunity to wish you all a great week, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Why is the Rav not at the? Why isn't the Rav at the school?
Well, because there's a change in the clock. I didn't know about that.
Right.
I got a little confused last week. It's not totally my fault, but now, Baruch Hashem, David reminds me up front, it's 2:15. I still need another reminder because I'm not used to 2:15. But I leave
last week to remind me. I had forgotten.
Yeah, I'm pretty impressed that you remembered. In any event, I'm
going to get a call from
I'm going to leave my shiva in about 20 minutes.
Okay.
And
thank you, Rav.
That's all, folks, as Donald Duck used to say. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.